Hi there, Jen Russell coming to you again in what I'm now coming to understand is going to be a series of videos that I originally thought would be geared more towards my existing clients who I'm not able to see in the way that I am accustomed, and going over some of the concepts that I like to talk about, but maybe a little bit more in depth than I have time in our sessions. But I realize that these are concepts that every single person walking around on the earth should know about and be able to utilize, whether you're an elite athlete or an everyday person who just wants to pick up that bag of curbside delivery groceries feeling stable and strong and without pain. And so these videos are really meant to be seen in the order that they are being created. So if you haven't watched the introduction and the supine 90-90 breathing drill, I would highly recommend watching them before this one, because this video is going to be going a little bit more into the why and how of the positioning cues that I went through in the previous video, and to really optimize those positioning or alignment or posture cues to further enhance the breathing drills. Because the idea is we're stacking these. You want to get good at the first thing before we get to the next and the next and the next, because the idea is that these ways of being in alignment and the ways of breathing that I'm going through should be the way that we move and breathe no matter what we're doing, whether we're picking up our grandkid or swinging a kettlebell. And so if you cannot maintain these positions while doing the supine 90-90 breathing drill, I guarantee that you are going to have a hard time maintaining them when you're doing your daily life or your sports. And you are setting yourself up for injury, if not today, then someday down the road. So do yourself a favor and take a few minutes. That's all I'm asking, is a few minutes each day, hopefully a couple times a day, ideally, to really work on these drills and get better at them. Because you can. That's the cool part. Because it's never too late. Our brains are really always capable of change. And to me, that's one of the most amazing things. Because we started out doing all this stuff really beautifully. And I've had a front row seat to an optimal mover in my 15-month-old daughter. And she spent the better part of the first 3 months of her life in that supine 90-90 position, really freaking owning that breath, owning trunk and core stability before her brain gave her permission to start moving her limbs. And so again, I would encourage you to do the same thing. So why these positioning cues? What's the big deal? So they are, again, long neck, chin back, chest wide, ribs down, hips relatively even. And the hips relatively even I didn't cover as specifically in the previous videos, and I'm gonna do that today. But let's start with long neck, chin back. If you think about the fact that our central nervous system is composed of our brain and our spinal cord, our nerves have to pass through our neck and then go to their respective locations. And so our head position becomes really imperative for the free flow of information. And when we talk about our nerves, we're not just talking about the nerves that affect our muscles, but also the nerves that innervate our organs that basically are keeping us alive. So they're kind of important, right? So imagine if you were washing your car and you had a hose, and someone came along and stepped on the hose. That's going to really impede upon the flow of that water. So that's where the head and neck position is going to really be important for the ability of our nerves to be able to get to where they need to go. So the two nerves in particular we're going to be focused on for intrinsic core stability, breathing, and spinal stability is going to be our phrenic nerve and our vagus nerve. The phrenic nerve innervates our diaphragm. And as we now know, our diaphragm is our main muscle of inhalation. And so that phrenic nerve goes through at the level of C3 to 5, in our C being cervical spine. So imagine if your head is here doing that device thing, that reading thing, that computer thing, right? And that nerve needs to go through at C3 to 5, you're really going to impede upon the ability of that nerve to do its job. The second nerve is called your vagus nerve. And for any of you who know anything about the vagus nerve, you'll know that it's an incredibly complex and important nerve that connects with a lot of very important structures to do with digestion and our voice. So our singers out there, it affects your larynx. And so it goes through at what's called your jugular foramen, through here in your neck, but it also goes through your diaphragm via a hiatus, which is a hole. Our diaphragm is really the connection between our thorax and our abdomen. And it has holes in it that some very, very important structures, including the vagus nerve, goes directly through. So that's where our positioning that I'm going to come to with your ribs become really important. But in this instance, I'm talking about the head position where it goes through at your jugular foramen. So long neck, chin tucked. The chest wide is really about optimizing the amount of space that your lungs have to fill. So if you're living here in shrug shoulder land and really compressing everything, you're really suboptimal in the space that you're allowing your lungs to be able to fill. The ribs down, which I've referenced is a hard one for me, is about getting the diaphragm in its optimal positioning so it can do its job, which is to descend downwards on the inhale. So to go into what that rib flare is again, it's here. And I used to walk around for years thinking as a singer that this was good posture. I was nice and open, right? Ready to take on the world and watch my conductor. But really what that was doing was jamming that diaphragm up in a long position so that it could not descend downwards. So ironically, in what I thought was good posture, I was in a suboptimal position for the diaphragm to be able to do its job, okay? So ribs down is about diaphragm getting in its optimal position to be able to do its job. And then finally, hips relatively even is about that famous thing that people talk about, the posterior or anterior pelvic tilt. So if our ribs are up in this position, they're flared up, often what ends up happening is in order to accommodate not falling over, because if your ribs are up here, if you didn't do anything with your hips, you'd end up falling forward. So what often happens, and I was one of those people where you tilt the pelvis forward, and what that does is it not only puts a tremendous amount of pressure on your lumbar spine, but it also puts all of your abdominal muscles in the front on stretch. And so now you're walking around kind of thinking you're swaggering around feeling good, when really what you're doing is you're leaving all of your abdominal organs unprotected. Because down here, we don't have any ribs protecting our organs from hernia. We only have our abdominal muscles and our rectus sheath. And so if you're walking around in rib flare and anterior pelvic tilt, you are really vulnerable here. So if you think ribs down and hips relatively even, so we're not asking for you to posteriorly tilt back that way. We're looking for relative neutrality so that all of these intrinsic muscles can work together as the team that they are meant to be. So I hope that those little tips and information was helpful to you as you work on these drills. Moving forward, we're going to continue to look for ways to optimize our breathing and spinal stability, and eventually we're going to move into hands and knees or quadruped position, to half kneeling, to standing, but the idea is that we want to master each step as we go along. So if you have any questions, you want to talk further about this stuff or work on some ways that you could really optimize these concepts, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to talk further about these things, and I will look forward to seeing you back here soon. Take care.